name's Frank Covetto. I'm the executive director of the SouthFork Natural History Museum, and I want to welcome everybody to the initial presentation of SOFO's East End Environmental Lecture Series. So this is the first presentation that we're having. We plan on doing this quarterly, every 3 months. We will have different topics related to the environmental field. Hopefully we'll have government people speaking, academia people speaking, and other nonprofit organization personnel coming to talk about climate change and other environmental topics that might be of interest to the community. I want to thank Melanie Mead, our education director, who put all this together over the last few months. We've been speaking about doing this for quite a while, but I think we were pretty adamant about making this work because, first of all, it's, the time of year is perfect to get people indoors to learn about the environment. And I want to thank Melanie for all her hard work in getting this up and running. So thank you, Melanie. I want to thank Irene Tully, who is a board member of the SouthFork Sea Farmers, for supporting and supplying the cider. I don't know what's left, but thank you, Irene. Appreciate that. I want to thank the SouthFork Sea Farmers for co-sponsoring this event. And I also want to thank LTV for being here. So this is being recorded and it will be distributed to the public in the near future. I also want to thank Barley Dunn from the East Hampton Town Shellfish Hatchery for being here. And I believe that a lot of you are part of the oyster growing community at the East Hampton Town Shellfish Hatchery. And I think Barley has done fabulous work with the SouthFork Sea Farmers and all you oyster growers out there who are really putting the effort into creating not only a sustainable ecosystem, but providing oysters for your family is also a nice benefit of being a part of that program. So I appreciate your hard work and hard efforts for doing that. So tonight's presenter is Dr. Bob Tiemann, who's a friend of mine. He's also a board member at the SouthFork Sea Farmers organization. He's a retired educator, retired school teacher educator. He's also the director of the SouthFork Sea Farmers Education Committee. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate him being here today for this first presentation of this lecture series. I just want to remind everybody that on December 21st, the next lecture series for this program is going to be Jay Krishna, our environmental educator and reptile amphibian specialist. He'll be talking about eastern tiger salamanders and the work he's doing scientifically with acoustic tags and how he's tracking eastern tiger salamanders that are endangered here in New York State. So that's going to be a pretty interesting topic if you're interested in continuing to visit the museum and participating in this lecture series. And then the next quarter, we're going to have somebody from academia talk about bats and raptors from the Eastern Long Island Audubon Society. So we're going to try to diversify a lot of these lectures so that we can, pique as much interest in the community as possible. So with that, I want to introduce you to Dr. Bob Tiemann for, talking about reestablishing oyster reefs here on the East End of Long Island. So thank you, Bob. Will you sure?
Thank everybody for coming in and spending your Saturday afternoon here. I'd like to present my co-presenters, Jocelyn Garcia, who is a senior at East Hampton High School, and Henry Cooper, a junior at East Hampton High School. Jocelyn has been putting up with me for about over 2 years now, and Henry for a little over 1 year. But they're both part of the science research program at East Hampton High School, and both combining their volunteer work with the SouthFork Sea Farmers with their research projects at school. And they are incredible kids and fantastic here. And they'll be presenting Gareth Hart's presentation. So what we're going to do is a brief introduction, which I think we should take. The students are going to go over why oysters, why they're so important to the ecosystem. We're going to discuss how to build an oystery, which 4 years ago, I just knew oysters tasted good. Learning how to build an oystery was just an evolution of trying and failing, and now I think we've got it down pretty well. And then I also want to talk a little bit about the internship experience and what it means to students in school. Because when I look back on my high school experience, and I was a high school teacher, I was an administrator, and I get to say it's really boring. And I wish I had had that internship experience. I wish I could have gotten out of the building and done something else. I'm part of the board for the SouthFork Sea Farmers. We work hand in hand with the East Hampton Shellfish Hatchery. Our role is to support them. And if you don't know the work they do, you should really get to know them better. They do incredible work throughout the bays here. Every time we go out, you'd find a clam, you find an oyster, or a rare scallop. And our mission at SouthFork Sea Farmers is to educate, raise awareness of the importance of sustainable marine aquaculture, and inspire constructed action programs. So this is the educate and raise awareness part, and building the reefs, that's the constructed action program. Now, this is a film we produced over the summer of our building an oyster reef in June. It's about a little over 6 minutes long, and it'll give you an overview of the whole process. And then the rest of the presentation will put a lot more detail to each section, each part.
On the east end of Long Island, New York, in the town of East Hampton, concerned residents have come together to fight for the health of local waters. The East Hampton Shellfish Hatchery staff, supported by SouthFork Sea Farmers, have expanded their shellfish enhancement efforts to include building oyster reefs.
People always thought fish, clams, they were limitless. And they'll always be there. But we never anticipated that the population density we now have, not only in East Hampton, but on Earth in general.
If you can imagine what this area was like way back when before it became a real tourist haven, there were people really living off the land, shellfishing, clamming, oystering, bay scalloping, and then that brown tide came through in the 80s and virtually wiped it out. So the current state of our bays, ever since the eradication of the eelgrass in the mid-80s, is really a desert bottom.
I remember first coming here and thinking, oh, this is great because it was so clean on the bottom. And then the more I understood, the more I was like, no, the bottom's a desert here.
So the East Hampton Shellfish Hatchery was established after that brown tide in the 1980s to try and restore local shellfish stocks. And in 2016, we started our oyster gardening program and then founded SouthFork Sea Farmers shortly after in an effort to enhance our educational and volunteer programs.
Maybe we could do more to actually bring the ecosystem back. Because in Chesapeake Bay, they're establishing oyster reefs everywhere to try to bring that ecosystem back, which was one of the most lucrative oyster nurseries in the world. So that got me discussing with Barley what the possibilities were, and when I first brought it up, his reaction was, I've always wanted to do that. So I said, okay, let's do that.
So in recent years, we've started to develop oyster reefs, which is another way to replace habitat, get more oysters out into the bottom. So we create about 300 of these shell bags that are full of shell and also incorporated with spat, baby oysters that are set on the shell, grow those for a period of time, and then we establish these 50 square yard oyster reefs.
If you guys could start doing the perimeter, like one of you just grab your own bucket, start doing the perimeter where you can see, and then we'll try to fill it in the middle with this.
You know, an adult oyster can filter 50 gallons of water a day. So if you multiply that by how many oysters are on a reef, that's a lot of water cleansing naturally without any negative impact on the ecosystem.
This reef represents a forest on an otherwise barren bottom. The volunteers are really amazing. They're coming from local high school students that are really passionate about this kind of project.
I got pulled into this internship through my science research class. I like to get my hands wet. I'm not afraid to get scratched or anything.
I'm in 12th grade at East Hampton High School.
I'm in the same program at East Hampton High School. I really like it's like hands-on, like experimental, like research. Like you're not just like sitting at a desk, like reading articles. It's something you can actually do, and it makes a big difference in our community.
And it's nice to see like a direct impact on the environment as well.
My love for the oysters came from growing up on the water. So when this project came around, it was a really exciting opportunity. So I jumped on board.
We got to keep a good pace going, but it's really going a lot slower than I had hoped because we can't see anything.
There's always things that go wrong when we're constructing these reefs. One thing that was particularly challenging was the turbidity in the water.
Because of the nature of the harbor, the ground is very soft. It's a lot of silt and other sediment. When we start moving around and trying to put the bags in, a lot of sediment starts to kick up, and it makes it hard for us to see where we're placing the bags.
A lot of things went right, but one of the things went wrong is there's a ton of like flies and like horse flies and like mosquitoes and stuff. And I put on a bunch of like mosquito repellent and stuff like that. But when I get out of the water, like the horse flies just absolutely destroy me.
The horse flies don't like Henry.
All right, I think we finally hit a decent pattern. It seems to be going pretty fast now. Just keep going. Whatever we're doing lately, we can see a little better.
Yeah, today's reef deployment was really textbook. Amazing crew of volunteers that helped us. We had an amazing daisy chain of folks handing bags off from trailer to boat. Nobody got cold, nobody got cut. Everybody had a good time, a lot of laughs. Success story on this reef would be coming back in the spring and seeing 2-inch oysters growing out of the mesh. The biodegradable mesh is sloughing off. So these are creating a multi-dimensional habitat that's already encrusted with oysters, and almost immediately there'll be other things entering that reef as cover. Grass shrimp, nursery fish like blackfish, black sea bass. And as that reef matures, those oysters are going to grow, they're going to filter the water, they're going to hopefully reproduce and produce more oysters either on adjacent reefs or on their own reef. Whether it's rainforests or oyster reefs or getting kids out into the wild areas to learn about nature, there's all kinds of things that can be done with a little bit of passion here and there, and you know, let's face it, a few dollars.
This project is an opportunity to build community, to bring back the ecosystem to its prior pristine nature, and to give a template for other groups to find their passion and do something about it. This is the Oyster opportunity.
Yeah. That was a lot of fun to do. It's 6 minutes. It only took about 20 days. But I'd like to thank Janine, who is, you saw her on screen, one of our volunteers who was incredibly helpful in the reef. And also at the end, there were 2 video interns, Taft and Sophie. Those were 2 students in the video class at East Hampton High School who helped the crew throughout the process. So they got some real outside of school work also. And now, you.
A keystone species is a population that serves as glue in holding an ecosystem together. And oysters are a great example of a keystone species because they are crucial in their environment. Oyster reefs provide habitat for adolescent species. For example, different species of crab and fish live in them. A study showed that crabs that lived in oyster reefs had a 4 times higher survival rate when living in the oyster reef compared to crabs that didn't live in the oyster reef. This may show that species that live inside oyster reefs have a higher rate of survival. Additionally, oysters help prevent erosion. The oyster reef absorbs wave energy, and this reduces the impact of the wave on the shore, and this helps mitigate erosion. Oysters also provide food for numerous species of crab and fish, and especially they are more easy to eat during their larval stage. This is because their shell hasn't fully developed, so predators can very easily eat them. Wait, there's one more.
Somebody do.
Oysters remove excess nutrients from the water. This helps prevent algal blooms, and Jocelyn will tell you more about that.
Algal blooms are an explosion of the algae population in the water. Depending on the type of algae in the water, these algal blooms can look like red, brown, or green clouds on the surface. This is where oysters come in. Oysters are filter feeders, and they take in algae, which is their main food source from the water, which keeps the algae population in balance. An average adult oyster filters approximately 50 gallons of water per day.
Wow.
This diagram shows how our community contributes to these algal blooms. The two main sources of the nutrients that feed the algal blooms are septic systems and fertilizer, and that's used to farms, home properties, and our many golf courses. As many of you know, algal blooms have been affecting local waters here on the East End for a couple of decades now. One of their main problems that they cause are fish kills. This is a picture. When I first saw it, looked like chia seed pudding, but it's actually a fish kill at the Shinnecock Canal. While we don't know the cause of this fish kill, which occurred in 2016, we do know that it was caused by a disruption in the marine ecosystem, which is what algal blooms do. They disrupt our ecosystem and can eventually lead to something like this.
Thank you, Jackson. All right, now the nuts and bolts of building a reef. The first thing you have to do is figure out where you want to place the reef. And that's usually I meet with Barley, and we make a determination on where we're going to start looking. And for Accabonac Harbor, which was our first location, the interns, which were two different interns at the time, and I used to walk the entire perimeter of the harbor, trying to find a place that was hard enough to put the reef, because Accabonac Harbor is pretty soft. There's a lot of muddy areas. So we went throughout the entire perimeter, and we found some possible locations. The other thing you want to make sure is there's good water flow, because that's how they're going to get fed and shit. You always just need a good water flow. And not too close to the mouth of the harbor. I don't know if you see. So the mouth of the harbor is right here. The closer you are to the mouth of the harbor, when the spawn happens in the spring, you don't want all those larvae washed out into greater waters. You want them to stick around so that there's a chance they'll set on the shells on the reef. First, keep it away from boat traffic. And something I was unaware of until the first reef was we had to be worried about where the duck blinds were. So the town gave me a map that showed where every duck blind was located, and we had to make sure that we were not impeding their line of sight. Mostly for the dogs, because the top of an oyster reef you can be cut up. So you don't want that oyster reef right under the top of the water and have a dog run through it to dig foul. So it's a legitimate concern. And then in the beginning, especially, where we're going to put them, they're uncertified or certified workers. my first thought, and Farley and I discussed this a lot, was we're trying to clean the water, so you put the reef where it's dirt. So our first locations, our first reef is going to be right about there, which is in the red area, which is waters that are uncertified year-round. So the dirtiest part of the bed. The state would hear none of it. They decided that they were concerned that someone would harvest from that reef, from the uncertified waters, eat them and get sick. And so we had to relook. So our first 3 reefs, none of the original locations passed muster with the state. The first one was because it was uncertified waters. The next 2, we were trying to combine erosion prevention with the reef. And they were both in spots where homeowners were losing land. One homeowner was very much in favor and is still following me, was saying, when can I get a reef? And the other one we could never get in touch with. I don't know how often they use their house, but it's not that often. But these are 2 areas where it's very obvious year to year they're losing ground. But the state made it so difficult to put an oyster reef close to the shoreline that at one point I just got on the phone and I said, would we be better off just finding a different spot? And they said, yes. So we did. So we wound up with our first 3 reefs being these locations. So you got reef 1, reef 2, and reef 3. Combine that with the oyster gardening site. Over here, we've got 4 different oyster populations in Akabane Harbor. Actually, 5 populations, because how many thousands of oysters do you put in there when you seed each year, Bo? 300, 400, 1,000 here. Okay, so that's a whole nother population. Each adult oyster produces 50 to 100,000 gannets. So that's 50 to 100,000 little oysters, larvae. There are many thousands of oysters in each reef, added to Varley's hundreds of thousands on the floor, added to the oyster gardening site, which is probably another 100,000 or so. That's a lot of larvae floating around in Akabana Car. And what we're trying to do is get the volume of that spawn up high enough where we can get some natural set. Where that small percentage of those larvae that survived, I mean, most of them wind up being fish food. But that small percentage that survives, if they start sticking to those piles of shell we put in there, now we've got a naturally growing oyster reef, which is hold up. Second thing we have to figure out after location is shape. How are we going to shape the reef? Which is, again, something 4 years ago I would have said, oh, reefs look like a line of shells. It, depending on our location and other concerns, they all took different shapes. Our first one here on the left was originally this serpentine linear reef, which is what I always had envisioned reefs looking like. And then later on we get in that other little piece that left an open eye in the middle. The second one was the one where we had to change the shape because of a duck line. Because the linear reef presents a much longer, bigger barrier for the dogs. So we went to a 7-yard by 7-yard square, which was less of a barrier. And all the oyster reefs have to be, by state mandate, 50 square yards. That's the maximum they can be. We're in process. We have the permits for our 4 oyster reef, and that will be in 3 Mile Harbor. But you can see that took on a totally different shape because it's right near marina. And owners of the marina have been very helpful, but when we put the reef in, they'll be there making sure that line is not going to inhibit boat traffic. And reef number 5, which is not yet approved, will be in Northwest Harbor, that part of Sabar. And we're considering doing that like an arrowhead because there are very strong winds and currents coming from the north there. And that would be the shape that would most likely endure that. Will also be, which you'll see later into Kumbarga, tying that together much more efficiently than we need to at the other sites. And this is about tying them together. This is the first reef, which was 3 bags across the bottom. The 3 bags on the bottom really serve just to bring the other bags up off the bottom so they don't get silted over. And those are just bags filled with shells, mostly clam, surf clam, and oyster shells. The second layer is the layer that has the spat-on shell. That's where we have the live oysters stuck to the shell, and they're up on the second layer. No matter what the shape, this is generally the structure, but that bottom layer free might go on to basically be 7 months more.
We'll need train bags.
Not yet. But Sue, the paperwork. I retired as an assistant superintendent at East Hampton schools, and mostly because I couldn't stand the paperwork. My kids, the teachers, all that, and that was fine. The paperwork was underworld handies. And then I go to put in an oyster reef, which I thought would be great fun also. And it is, except there's also a pile of paperwork to do it. This would be like the 2 reefs at the same time, so that's why there's 8 envelopes ready. But there are 4 different departments on the state level that you have to get approval from, and that's after getting approval from the County of East Hampton trustees. Now, the East Hampton trustees have been nothing but support. They've been fantastic. And they're collaborating with us on finding the right way to do it. And the state, I think, is well intended. But they have regulations upon regulations upon regulations. And this is some of the paperwork that we have to present to the state, including getting, this one always busted out, the license to collect or possess marine resources, which this is a bunch of paperwork that one of the questions they ask are how many of the species you're collecting do you have? And it's kind of an impossible question to answer. So I make up a big round number and I send it up, and it seems to work. They all, there's a common application for the 4 of them, and then they will all send additional letters to you asking for additional paperwork. I did mention shucks. We need shells. So we started collecting shells. Actually, right out here in the parking lot at SouthFork, there's a trailer with a banner on it just like that. That's one of our sites. And the other is at the end of the East Hampton Town docks. We're collecting shells because we need a lot of shells. Now, you saw the pile of the video that the kids were shoveling the rock. We have a program now through the SouthFork Sea Farmers collecting shells from local restaurants. And that's done by volunteers. And I think, and Barley, you see the pile growing out at the Montauk site. I think from just our collection, we might have enough to do in a reef next year, which in the past we've had to purchase shells. These are the participating restaurants, and they deserve a shout out. That's why they're in the presentation here. And you say this one better than I do. Go ahead.
El Buco al Mar.
Thank you. Rowdy Bowl, almonds, those are year-round collections. And in the summer, we collect from Lunch, Shark Bar, Bostwick's Chowder House, and Bostwick's on the deck. And without them, we'd be spending thousands of dollars buying shells. This is what we had to go buy shells from the Billion Oyster Project in the city. And I don't know if you know about the Billion Oyster Project, but if you don't, Goober. It's amazing what they're doing. And we are basically a mini billion oyster project, not so many oysters. To do one reef, it takes about 18 yards of shell, which is almost fill 20-yard dumpster. We purchased from the Billion Oyster Project, but then we had to figure out how we're going to get those shells from Governor's Island, where they store them, out to the East End. And Mickey's Carting came to the rescue. They basically donated a truck and that dumpster for a day. They drove in to Governor's Island with me, and we had to build a shell, and they brought it back out and dumped it behind the hatchery in Montauk. And without them, I don't know how much it would have cost us to bring that shell from there to here. So another shout out to Mickey's. Now, from the beginning, Barley and I talked about not putting anything in the ecosystem that shouldn't be there. Often for oyster reefs, sometimes use metal cages. Sometimes they'll use cement blocks with oysters embedded in them. The spato cement, I guess you call it. But we decided to try to keep everything biodegradable. So we have biodegradable bags and made from a company called Vespe, D-E-S-E, in the Netherlands. And if we take that, just pass this around and feel it. Because this is made out of potato starch. And they're pretty rugged. And they're, according to the website, they should last for about 2 years in salt water. And our first reef is in almost 3 years at this point. And the bags are still there, not intact, but they're not gone totals. But eventually they'll just fade away into the ecosystem. And the other thing we do is we tie the bags. We use hemp twine, which is also biodegradable.
Can you just walk me through, the type of shells that each layer?
Like you're saying, yes. The shells we put in bulk and all the bags are the same, which are a combination usually of oyster shells, surf clam shells, and some small clam shells. Because those are hard shells. They won't stick to or won't do well with like the scallop shell or a mussel shell. To fill up those bags with those shells. Okay, and the process is coming up now. Okay. You're up to that. That's all. Not bad. Plus the bags for of spat on shell for the top layer. This is where community involvement comes in. This is where Janine, I first met Janine. She came out to start shoveling shelters. A lot of shells. Searched 50 bags you needed for one reef. We learned a lot by trial and error. In the beginning, I was thinking, okay, we'll put like 6 or 7 shovelfuls in each bag. That would be less bags, less times we have to move things around. I didn't realize that once you get those bags in the water and things start growing and the oysters start getting bigger, they get really heavy and then they start to rip. And so that was a big problem in the first 2 reefs I think we made. So this last reef, 3 shovelfuls of shell in each bag, tied up quickly, and everything just went much more smooth. But it takes 750. Little less than half of those get spat on shit.
How many hours would you stay bagging the shells?
I would say we were out there about 4 days shoveling, and that's 6 hours. 4 to 6 hours a day. A lot. Yeah, it was a lot. And how many loads shoveling shell?
10. Honestly, Kelsey really likes to tie the bags. But really going.
8.
Where do you get the spat from?
It's coming up. What a good question. Yeah, that guy. Yeah. Okay, so weekends at the Montauk hatchery. And then once we have these 750 bags ready, a little less than half of them get handed over to Volley and his crew at the hatchery. And this is where with your amazing work balance. I mean, we're helping them, but they do such incredible work. That right there is the broodstock conditioning tank. And basically, the difference between that and any other tank is they can change the water temperature and bring it up slowly. My grandpa, that temperature is pretty much static at 6. At 6 for the conditioning. Yeah. Okay. All right. And then what they do is they'll take mature oysters, a couple of dozen, 30 per swan. 30 per swan. Put them in that tank, and then basically trick them into thinking it's spring. So they will spawn in that tank, and we'll have millions of larvae at our disposal. Now these larvae, they want to eat. And they grow quickly. I mean, they don't eat a lot, but they're microscopic and they're doubly in size very often. So they eat a lot for their size. So at the hatchery, they have to grow food. They have to feed those larvae. And now when we think about the dreaded brown tide, well, there it is. Okay. It's a highly concentrated bunch of algae, which then get fed into the tanks so to keep the larvae alive until we move them into the bag. Is that accurate so far? Yeah. I don't know. Generally, so I could tell by it was generally. So all those bags, a little less than half of those bags, are put in tanks. And then those larvae, when they're just about ready to set, and I believe they get a little spot on them when they're just about ready to set, which Foley and his crew will be checking under a microscope for. And when they see that, then they get introduced to these tanks, which have the shell bags in it already. And when they're looking for something to stick to, they'll stick to our shells. Now think about the oysters you get on your plate at the restaurant. They don't have the oyster shell stuck together, right? They're just full by themselves. That's because for oyster gardening, oyster farming, all the stuff you eat, they do the same process, but on the bottom, there's not large shells, there's crushed shell on the bottom. So these little microscopic, it almost feels like pretty fine sand are pieces of shell. Those microscopic larvae will stick to a almost microscopic piece of shell and then grow to be mature oysters, but they'll be separate. They won't be an oyster that's going to create a reef because the net will stuck together. So that's how you get your nice deep cup oyster at the restaurant. This is spat on shells. Those are dozens of oysters stuck to one oyster shell. And that's the real basis of our reef. Once we have that spat on shell and they're mature enough to move, which is probably 6 weeks, I think is what you usually look for. Yeah, round about there. They're big enough so they don't get chowed on by the frails. So we give them a little time to mature. Then we load them on the truck and we bring them to the site, which is usually by boat. This we saw in the video. So actually building a reef. Before we get to this part that you're saying, the students and I go out and stake out the site because we want to make sure we're not spending that day figuring out where the line should be. So you see that, I don't know, you can't see it well now, but there are 5 stakes in there which give the outside perimeter 7 yards by 7 yards. And then there's one stake in the middle because on this reef, we wanted to leave a hole in it. And the hole is because in that other first reef, you saw that eye we made. In that eye is where we saw some natural set. Because I think the water was a little more stagnant, stuck in there. So we held on to a few more larvae. So we did the same thing on this. We let the hole in the middle, hoping for that. And we'll be putting bags in those on each reef in the spring before the spawn. But we're putting bags of blank shell so that we can see if we had any natural sediments each spring.
Where are those beds, please? Just around me.
I would put them in the hole in that one, and the one reef where we don't have a hole, Chelsea's doing her research with. She put one bag in the middle and one bag on perimeter to see if there was a difference, and that was just in growth. So those already had spat on shell, and we're looking to see if either of them grew more quickly and had less mortality. And so that's one day to stake it out. Second day, we put the first layer on the bottom. And then the third day, we put that top layer of spat on shell. This is the first reef. And Wally was talking about hoping to come back and see those oysters growing through the mesh. Well, that was the first reef, and that's what it'll look like about a year afterwards. And those are about 3 inches just sticking out the top.
Do they harvest those?
No, these are all in sites that are not to be harvested. The town makes some shellfish sanctuaries. And you wouldn't, you know what? If you saw these oysters compared to the ones you get in a restaurant, you probably wouldn't want them. They're very flat. They grow very quickly. The ones you get in a restaurant, like if you have how many people here have oyster cages? You know, to get them nice, you take the oyster, you roll it and crush the edge. And then it gets fatter and fatter instead of just growing out like that. You know, that doesn't happen with a natural oyster. So they're going to be flat. They're not going to have that nice cup. It wouldn't sell as well. And we want their job is to clean.
Yeah.
That is an underwater shot taken last Saturday of the reef that we just put in June. And you can see those are oysters. I mean, it's not a great shot because, well, I took it and I just got the GoPro a month ago and I still don't know cool. But you can see oysters actually feeding. When I was there and you see it on film, you have to see the work. So it's cool. And it's covered with life. Yeah. You know, it's just exciting to see. And that's after only a few months. That's the reef building. Now we're going to get to the mine building part. Internships and building community. So oyster reefs is a keystone activity. You know, we talked about oysters and the reefs as a keystone to the ecosystem. This process of building oyster reefs with the SouthFork sea farmers, with the East Hampton Shellfish Hatchery, with the high school students, local businesses, volunteers. This is a keystone to building a community around environmental purpose. Our interns. This is our first intern. Sky Tansman, now at Harvard. And when she was in the science research program, she won the awards on here. She was the trailblazer. She set basically the bar for everybody else that came after her. She was an amazing intern and so much fun. And one of the things about the interns, I think I'm the one who does all the learning. You know, they're just kind of guiding you along. The second intern we had was Nick Cooper, older brother of Harry, who also tries to make fun of his brother about their football sports, which were pretty good. I like that. Also won honors with his work. And then I'd like to ask the interns to talk a little bit about their experience doing this kind of work versus being in the classroom. So just if you could just share like how the skills, what you learn, how you learn it, and things we've talked about over the last 2 years.
Yeah, so being in this internship, I've had the experience of researching science and learning in the field versus in a classroom at my desk. It's very different. You get to do experiments, you get to conduct experiments, do everything yourself versus in a classroom. You're learning, but on slideshows, you're not really doing much. So this has been a great experience for me. I've also had the opportunity to expand my social network. I met Bob through this. I met Henry, even though we go to the same school, and Arlie. And then I've just learned so much from them and working together as a team. And then I think the main thing from this internship that I learned is that nothing goes according to plan. We constructed, it constructed the second reef, the square reef, in December. And I brought a wetsuit, a 3MN wetsuit, and that was not enough to save me from the cold. So I definitely learned from that experience.
The first layer we put in on that reef, it was snowy, which was,
I have to put some more time.
I really like this internship because you get to do hands-on work, and as Jocelyn said, this internship will kind of throw curveballs at you. Like, for example, we could barely get the car through to get to the hatchery, or is it the hatchery or the nursery in Maltata?
Oh, yeah.
We could get the car through so we can like walk, crawl across the wind bushes. And Yayan knows my grandpa actually was like really involved in sort of just planning and that sort of thing. So this is kind of interesting to me because I kind of get to see how that happened, like the base of that.
one of the things about having been an educator for 35 years, and I don't know how many fellow educators there are in the room. I know there's at least 1, 2, 3. Getting out of the classroom experience to me is really important. And I feel like I was the central office administrator who wanted to change schools for 35 years and got this hair on my trying to do it. If you're a parent of children in school now, there's no reason they cannot have an internship in a field that interests them. Any school can do it. They just have to make a few simple adjustments. Push for it. It's an important addition to any high school student's experience.
Can you talk about the research class? Obviously, you guys have given time to do this, so not all schools have that same structure.
Yeah, I got for me, and I think both of us, we do most of our work on, like, out on the field. So I usually use that class time to do other homework.
So they give you a period.
They get us a period, yes, each day. We write our papers in that class, but that's really about it. We do most of this research out for school or on the weekends.
And is it 12 months a year? I mean, I know you were in the water in December, but can you talk about the schedule? Like how often you're out?
Yeah, this has been a journey that's, been ongoing for a couple of years. But we constructed one reef. We basically monitor that reef. We measure the growth of the oysters, and then comes a second reef. So there's no really off season for this project, but we do have breaks in the tweets.
But the students do help with all that paperwork that goes to the state. They sign, not me.
So I guess it's an ongoing.
And then for this presentation, we met during your period, your 9th period of the school 4 or 5 times. And that's also, I'll go to the school for that period whenever we carry to a lot of Saturdays.
Are you working? Yeah. How many weekends do you typically dedicate to?
It kind of depends. I just ran those streets. Like in the summer when we were shoveling, it was 2 days in a row. We were out there for 6 hours. And luckily she brought us food while we were doing it. We just got streets.
He's good,
That's one of the other things that this internship has taught us, time management. So we have to make time for the work that we have at the reef. But it's very inconsistent.
It also depends on for example, I know we had to plan sort of to work during low tide because that's why that you can see the water best, you can see the ground and see what we're working with.
So that's 2 or 3 days in each month where there's low tide. So we have to work around the tide as well.
Okay. So, question for you: if a student from another school wanted to get involved, what would we need?
Yeah, we've always opened up the internships to any East End schools. Right. So they could just contact these SouthFork CPOs It was on the website. Right? Yes.
You know, Cornell has done a lot of work with people on North Fork, remote oyster farming. Just anybody can learn how to do it. Do you work with them? Are you involved with that, or do you get support from them?
We, well, Farley help. We don't work often with Cornell though. Collaborated over the years quite a bit. You know what I mean? It's a tiny community, so we're always all in touch. But they kind of do their own projects, and there's, you know, with the algae folks, we do more work with the harmful algae guys. Do a lot with Stony Brook. Come in, let's yeah, Goldler, Bierson, Albersi.
Yeah, and after the biodegradable of mesh dads begin to disintegrate, what creates the adhesion of shells?
The hope is spat going on spat going oysters, you know, sticking together naturally, which what is how a natural oyster eats breed.
And on the reefs is done, how many the natural spat occurs now, so would that be like a...
That's a fingers crossed. And I don't know because in most cases they haven't had natural set on reefs, all the man-made reefs. We're hoping that, especially in Acabana Harbor, which is fairly small, you know, to have those 4 populations and the seed population all spawning, that we can get a thick enough larvae suit to get it to, you know, heighten our chance of getting natural set. And then if that happens, it's kind of spins out of spiral.
So what year are you in terms of the process?
Reef number 1 went in almost 3 years ago. September 2022.
And then you've done 1 year?
We've done 1 a year.
So you would expect those reefs to grow over time?
I would hope, but when we say grow, we're talking about minuscule. You know, yeah. If they start growing in a way where people say they're getting too big, I'll just answer yeah.
The reefs are built in uncertified water.
No, they're in certified water. They're in seasonally uncertified water, or season certified. What are these? I'm sorry, first 2 are. The one we just put in is in certified water year-round. The one they just approved in 3 Mile is the first one they approved for us that is in year-round uncertified waters, which to me was a great job.
I was curious if there's going to be any sampling in what is thought to be barren substrate above, and then know that the project's had an impact. That there is a set served by what?
We'll be looking for set. And also, the reason I would have put GoPro was because of growth. You know, that barren bottom that was showed in film, the growth on the reef and in the surrounding area, the plant growth on the bottom is amazing. And it is like this little forest now growing on the bottom of an otherwise barren bottom. So it's really cool, and I want to document that. Cool. Any other questions?
Will the reefs be marked for navigational purposes?
They all have 1 buoy in the middle, but the one on the in 3 Mile that's near the marina.
Yes, right in front.
It's the one thing the owners of the marina, so they required us having some clear buoys for that. And if that one grows, well, yes.
Are there things that have been learned from the Million Oyster Project, which has been going for a while, that are applicable to what you guys are doing?
I can't say I personally have learned anything or seen an insight there that I was like, oh, I didn't know that. But their volume is so much different than ours. They're using metal cages, big giant metal cages. And they're also dealing with New York Harbor. So they don't have that set because they've got New York Harbor, which, believe it or not, cleans out every day. Oh, the flow there is incredible. So they can say, okay, we're going to find this spot that has enough flow for the oysters to survive, but we'll wash out everything, every bag. So
Have you had any major storms come through and impact your reef?
we haven't had any storm damage. The one we're going to be putting in Sag Harbor and the Northwest Harbor there, that's the first one where I'm concerned about storm damage. Where the other reefs, we tied them, a little bit around the perimeter. The linear reef we tied up pretty well with the hemp rope. It helped fine. But the one for Northwest Harbor there, we're going to really have to tie it together well, as multiple spots on each bear.
Is there any reason why you chose oyster instead of clams?
Yes. Clams also filter. Oysters also create habitat. Clams are all solitary. They're going to burrow down under the sand. The oysters create habitat for innumerable species. You go there 2-3 weeks after we put them down, and they decide to start growing. We see little adolescent blackfish full of saying everything. Basically, it's Nemo. Nemo beats a place to hide. We're creating a place to hide all those adolescent fish.
The
Coral reefs of the north. Yes.
Not to normalize, but if you, in your dreams, 5-10 years ago, what those reefs look like?
You wouldn't see any remnants of the bags and the things we did, and they would all have, the whole top would have fins of oysters feeding. And hopefully a little more than 50 square yards. So,
Lots of natural set on.
and that would be all due to natural set. Yeah. Yes.
Is there any thought of maybe transplanting eelgrass around them so that grows because we eat it?
There is research about the relationship between oyster reefs and eelgrass, and they seem to both help each other. And
That's all I could tell.
yeah, go ahead.
So basically, oysters, they filter out the water, and that basically just helps the eelgrass because they need a clean environment to live in. And but I mean, they have a mutualistic relationship basically, so they both add to each other. So, or should I talk about what?
Yeah, tell what you did.
And so, what me and Bob went down to, what was the beach in Montauk? Idan?
Idan Beach.
Yeah, we went to Idan Beach in Montauk because eelgrass is so scarce. There's barely any eelgrass left. So we went there and we adopted eelgrass. We got some sort of baby eelgrass, which they kind of like white little stems, and then some adults eelgrass. And this played something with low tide because we needed to see the bottom. Because I built like a little square made of PVC pipe and put string inside to measure out like little 3x3 inch quadrants. And we just planted the eelgrass around different areas. A couple of them are located next to oyster reefs, and I'm just gonna measure data around there and see what allergens are.
Or see the grander hole. Is oysters are filtering contaminants on is it dangerous?
That's why you don't eat them from uncertified buoys. They're not only filtering, they're eating algae. That's their normal thing to eat. If they're uncertified waters, the water is too dirty for us to eat. If they're uncertified waters, they're not eating anything that we can't eat.
Can you talk a little bit about the other benefit of oyster reefs for shoreline stabilization or storm surges and, more violent storms? These oyster reefs also can play a part in stabilizing shorelines along our coastline. So
That's I know water quality is the primary focus here, but these oyster reefs can also help with erosion. And what we wanted to do, the states they weren't saying no. They were saying we had to do basically every species that you were touching on that land surface, they wanted to report on, which just became too big a bear to handle. But yes, if we can put these, I would say like 2 or 3 feet off the shoreline, in a place where, like Acrobatic Harbor, you could see places where the mud just sloughs off and you're losing a couple of feet of the the grassland every year. If we could put them strategically there, it would definitely cut down on the wave action which causes that. It wouldn't eliminate it, but it would definitely mitigate. Any other questions?
Just what depths are the reefs?
The reefs all are basically at high tide. They're probably about 5 feet of water in high tide.
Yeah.
And then at low tide, you want them just sticking up.
Yeah.
Because then we can go service them during low tide. Any other questions?
It kind of reminds me of the Seinfeld episode where Cosmo takes the pot of lobster they found like out here in Pacific Sea from lobster. You know, there was somebody else's lobster. Somebody else, he said take for him. Just a reminder, check our website and calendar programs on the website if you're interested in participating for SOFO programs and more lecture series presentation. We'll check our website, solidity.sofa.org.
If anyone's interested, we are trying to make a documentary film. That little piece of the meeting was the sizzled about. So if anybody is interested, you for DC support.
Get involved. That's the key here. That's what we're doing.
Yeah.